room to the left.
Great.
Have a music video and a run through NOLA Six Flags.
Oh, interesting.
James?
Steven's got
Steven's
the big
here.
bird.
I have a painting in the far room here. It's oil and mixed media on canvas. Mixed media is assembled found paintings and wood.
Great.
I have a series of sculptures, which are effigies of my sister, and they're made out of wood and lithographs.
Okay.
And I have this big piece here with the flower petals. And there is a VR helmet that is also covered with flower petals on a pedestal in the back.
Mhm. Great. Wonderful. So let's dig into Westbeth. What is it like to be here? For me, as a New Yorker, Westbeth has a very particular meaning, but some of us are from other places, so I would love for you to talk about what it means to be able to live and work at Westbeth, and from where you're coming from, what that means, whether you're a native New Yorker, whether you're coming from another country, another city, and let's just go down the panel, and we'll mix it up as we go, but for right now, let's go this way.
I was an army brat. I was born in Germany and mostly raised in Louisiana. And I went to art school in Chicago, so I've been bouncing around a little bit. But I've been in New York for more than 20 years now.
Right. And how long have you been at Westbeth?
About 8 years.
Oh, okay. Great.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I grew up right around here.
Okay.
I went to PS11.
Yep.
And then moved around Queens for a while.
Okay.
Was back in the city in time for 9/11, which I'm doing a feature film about.
Interesting.
And my mom always had friends here since I was a kid. So I have like pictures of myself here in the gallery when I was like 4.
Wow.
That's cool.
That's really cool.
And so we would always be here. It took 22 years to get the apartment in 2014, and it's been a blast.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah.
I'm from Aberdeen, Scotland. I arrived here in New York in 1978. I spent most of my time in the East Village when the gallery was exploding there, and I heard about this place, but it took me a while to sign up. I did eventually apply, and I was 15 years on the waiting list.
Wow.
And I've been here more than 20 years now, 22, 23 years I think, and it's amazing.
And is there anything like this in where you grew up in Scotland?
No.
Is there anything
No.
similar? Okay, that's interesting.
I mean, I'd heard about it, and even to this day, I've had so many friends who have said, "Oh, I wish I signed up when you did." It took so long, but time passes, and hopefully you're still alive, and you get in, and it's this community that's spectacular.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about community as well, but that's a great story. So all of us can sign up now if you're an artist. Yes.
I'm from Southern California originally, and been in New York for almost 20 years. And I live here, just recently moved in September with my wife and 2 kids.
That's amazing.
12 years old.
That is, I mean, the family housing is huge too, because there are some places where you can get a studio somewhere, but to be able to bring your family, that's awesome. Thank you. And do they go to school in the neighborhood now, or?
They're still going to school uptown at the schools they were in.
Yeah.
It happened so fast, you know.
Yeah.
You off the waiting list and you say yes or no. Just jump
And you
in.
got down here.
They're still in their schools.
Oh, that's great.
Up in uptown.
Cool. That's very cool. Christine?
Yes, I was born in Bed-Stuy in Brooklyn, and I never knew about art. I had no idea until I got really old, and then I found out about it. But I came to Westbeth when actually it was like a baby. I came here, and I've been here more than half a century.
Wow. And how does it feel as a New Yorker? Like, is there any, like, New York pride associated with it? Does it feel very separate from New York? Like, how is it as a born and raised New Yorker, if there's a few of you?
That's a complicated question because Westbeth is such a unique place that I almost feel I'm from here first and then from New York second.
Yeah, no, I think
Family.
that's, yeah.
And I originally am from France, and I came here, I think it's almost 30 years ago now.
Could I ask you to speak up, please, both of you?
Yeah.
I have a problem with.
Yeah, I'll repeat for you. Yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, almost 30 years, and I heard about Westbeth for a long time, but it always seemed like a pie in the sky, so I did apply when they reopened the list in 2019,
Okay.
and last March, we got in with my daughter, and it was just like, I was in Brooklyn for 25 years, and all of a sudden I was in Manhattan again. It was really weird.
Yeah.
And but I feel like I was embraced right away by the community, and it's kind of a different thing. Manhattan doesn't have the community feel that I think Brooklyn kind of has more easily.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this is a different world within Manhattan.
Yeah. So that leads me to my next question is, what is unique about living in the community of Westbeth? Because you're amongst artists, so there's some people who are relatively new, some people who've been here for a while. Can you speak to kind of the feeling of living amongst artists, along with the beautiful gift of housing that's affordable? What is it like?
We speak the same language, basically.
Okay.
There's already kind of an understanding, I think, about choices we've made in life, and that, I don't know, makes it much easier to communicate as human beings without having too many, like, is there like this or that can fit into my whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, the expression a village within a village or whatever is certainly true about this place. I mean, when I first moved here, I spent most of my time just painting alone and going out drinking and debauching, coming home painting again. And when my wife moved in, she got me to come out and start actually interacting with the neighbors. And all of a sudden I'm like, this place is so cool. You don't have to actually interact personally with everyone, but you know that everyone, for the most part here, is a creative soul who's going about their art, and it's really inspiring.
Yeah.
And comforting.
Mm.
I think it's follow on him. I think it's the idea that when you're here, there's always this idea of possibility. There's always something about to happen, whether it's in your art or in someone else's art. I mean, you find out some people are doing some great things, and you're so happy for them, and then you do something great, and they're happy for you. So it's this constant feeling of potential being achieved. I mean, even in the middle of failure sometimes, but there's this constant feeling that things can be created.
And sorry, I just wanted to interject, you're right with that. You didn't see that one of our neighbours, Beverly,
Yes,
saw the
yeah.
the Turner Prize.
I know.
Which is one of the biggest art prizes in the world, and one of our residents won that prize.
Not only that, she's a gardener we have a committee, a flea market committee that takes care of boxes, planter boxes on Bethune Street. And she has a box. She's a volunteer gardener. Veronica Ryan is a volunteer gardener for Westbeth.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Who just won an amazing world-renowned award, who's like keeping our garden down the street. I think that's a great example of what is possible here.
I always say that it takes a village to raise an artist, and it's kind of a coincidence because I got excited about that when I was moving here, because I thought this as a village we can help raise each other, and create and help create our work and create our careers at the same time, and then expanding into the entire West Village,
Mm-hmm.
have a larger village of people there too that we can help and be helped by.
Yeah.
So, the network's been exciting for me.
That's great. Do you feel like there is a network with like local galleries and things? Because I'm not as familiar with visual art, how like the career path kind of goes. I'm more familiar with.
It's a little bit more about like when you make a piece of art, it's like did a tree fall in the woods if nobody saw it?
Mm-hmm.
So you make a piece of art and you need somebody else to see it, and that's kind of a part of it.
Art is so ephemeral. This place is incredible. It's filled with legendary people. It's amazing. You walk down the hall and you run into people, you don't even know who they are, and they're doing incredible work, and you can feel it. You know it.
Yeah.
I was here at 2014 until I started doing the gallery in 2019 as visual arts chair. I didn't know that many people, and you could still feel it. It was incredible. But as soon as I started working with the gallery, doing this 100-person curation every year,
That's
my fourth
amazing.
one.
When lockdown for COVID was easing up in the beginning, a feels at a safe distance in the courtyard and drink wine and get to know each other, even though we knew each other a bit better. And it's a bunch of old people, let's say, who have incredible stories. And people passing by, walking down the street, looking up, these old people sitting drinking wine. One's a mammoth feminist who marched with Gloria Steinem. One's a filmmaker who's made films that are shot all over the world. You know, you've no idea who lives in this building, who's done what they've done in the group, nurtured by this building.
Yeah, that's incredible. And we're, a little plug, we're doing another webinar next week on some of the artists, someone who's doing research with many of the artists who've lived here. So that's a Zoom webinar if you want to attend, trying to capture some of these stories and share them, because there is such a wealth of artistic history. And I mean, royalty is a bad word, but like for me, that's a Leanne comment, not a Village Preservation comment. But you know, the history and the archives in people's lives here is very incredible. And so we talked a little bit about the pandemic. What was it like to be in isolation but in a village? Like, you have your community here, but you know, the best you could do is sit across from each other and drink wine.
For me, when I was told it was going to be 3 months of lockdown, I was like, all right. I measured diagonally across my doorway. What's the biggest painting you can make? And I worked every day for 3 months, and I had my wife and daughter locked in with me, so I was happy as Larry.
Yeah.
I painted every day, made the biggest painting I ever made.
Wow.
And I thought I'd be stuck with it forever. The first person who saw it after lockdown purchased it.
Wow.
So it was fabulous. I miss being locked down.
Yeah.
Me too. Oh my God, it was so productive. I was working. I finished work that I hadn't finished in like 8 years, like 10 years, you know. And that was the best part. My wife and I created music. You know, there's so much going on, like albums of stuff, and it was like such a great time.
Yeah.
And the birds.
Tell us about the birds.
Oh my God. It was the whole island.
No traffic, so
The whole island stopped vibrating, and the birds came back, and the water got calm, and you could feel the difference.
Wow. Any other reflections on?
I just wanted to comment that it's not only the famous people who, you know, become famous living here, it's also the artists who don't really get fame and maybe discovered years later, but we still have that same commitment, dedication, and really hard work without ever knowing whether we'll ever get any reimbursement or commission or royalty. I mean, we all hope for that, but it's something that being an artist, you just can't help doing. That's like the key. And the second thing, during the pandemic, I started doing work that I had never done before. So every day was like, what am I doing and why am I doing this? But I did it. But I also want to add that at Westbeth, we created an emergency response team where there were floor captains. We arranged for, there's a guy, George Kaminsky, who's currently the executive director. He arranged for food to be delivered to people who were locked in, you know, who couldn't actually.
Boxes of food.
Boxes.
The
Of
whole
food.
community room full of food.
Wow.
People from all over the world who had lived here or knew someone sent masks and gloves and hand sanitizers. It was suddenly, we were both locked down and yet connected by this pandemic because of who we are and what this building means to a lot of people.
And then some of the people in the building started giving out food to people outside of the building.
Yes.
Driving to some of the housing, the projects, whatever you call them, and giving food that we've got out. So we're now serving our community as well.
Yeah. So a mutual aid, you didn't need any training on how do you do mutual aid 101. The artists came together and just did it.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Any other reflections? And I mean, what is it like to be surrounded by artists, especially visual artists? You could work in your homes maybe, but there's also performing artists here who may have been out of work or different. What was it like, the tenor kind of in the apartment buildings with everybody, or were you just so isolated you didn't know? Yeah.
Well, I've been doing yoga with a couple women in the building like twice a week at 7:30 a.m. for like 5 years. And so we would actually go to one of their apartments, you know, twice a week. And so then we switched to Zoom. And so we've been doing yoga on Zoom, and we haven't gone back to in person at all. It's like, yeah, why? You know, we're in our pajamas doing it.
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
We don't even bother walking down the hall. But you know, it was really nice having that connection to people who are in the building who you can't really, you know, meet in person.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, they're just, you know, they're on the same floor, but you have to avoid each other. So it's really, Zoom in many ways was a real saving grace for the pandemic.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And can you describe, we've just kind of started to get into this, but your process as an artist, has it changed at all since you've come here? Has it been amplified? What is it like to be an artist? And we started talking about this, an artist surrounded by other artists. You have your shorthand with each other. What are some other benefits or things you experience here as an artist?
I mean, inspiration for sure. Just seeing, as Christina was saying, whether famous or not, but you see the passion, you know, and for visual or any other art form. Like, it's just making me feel like, wow, I can just really do that my whole life. And being here forced me to really think that way, where before I always had to think of another job or something else to support, you know, my family and stuff. So that's great. That's huge to be able to immerse yourself in your work. That changes everything. And also for me, the space, having enough space to get my stuff out of storage, revisit older work, like starting archiving some of the stuff. Like it's been amazing. It's a long process, but it's been great to create new work and look at older work as well.
Yeah, we'll get back into archiving because we love that. Village preservation, we'll talk a little bit about that. But any other thoughts about how it affects
also,
your...
I mean, I work at home, so many of us do work in our own live workspace, but other people have separate studios. So it's kind of really nice also seeing, we're walking down the corridor and seeing someone, knowing they're going off to the studio to work, like Sheila Shred, who's like a wonderful resident here. Every day she goes to work, and you know, and you see her coming from work, she takes a garbage out from a studio, puts it away. It's a working artist.
Yeah.
And again, like Christina said, it's not about fame or recognition, is we're all aware that we're working artists, and seeing these people, I mean, I get asked, what are you up to working?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's supportive.
That's great. That's great. When I was the chair of the Dance NYC Junior Committee, we did like practice of when someone say, "What are you working on?"
Right.
And responding with, "I'm working" or "I'm doing something."
Yeah.
So that it wasn't like for dancers, it's like, "Oh, so are you on? So you think you can dance?" And I'm sure there's equivalent things of things for visual artists.
I do Open House New York, the media for Open House.
Oh, yeah?
Along with the body of people that work on it here, and you know, doing music with residents. There's so many musicians, and you know, Bill Dots, Pedro Guardia did this year's for us.
Wow.
And just like, you know, he's a Grammy-winning, you know, artist, and he's in the building, and he's just practicing, and he's like, hey, you know, like we'll play and you record. It's like perfect, you know,
That's
done.
great.
And then we just did something that, you know, it's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, and it can be next to someone who maybe doesn't have a Grammy but is just as talented and working just as hard because it's the community of artists. That's really incredible.
I just have to add that part of living here is the kids living here, because my kids grew up here, so I know who they ultimately became, and so I know that the exposure to the arts, whether they become artists or not, is so important to further the cultural life of the city. I did a whole series of interviews with kids about 10 years ago, asking, you know, and some of them asking them what it was like to grow up here, and they would say it was great, and it was fantastic, it was great. Kids running around, kids going into other people's apartments, learning about art, learning about music, learning about being dramatic. But the important thing is that some of these kids decided not to become artists, mainly because the life was too hard, and that wasn't their goal. But they always, each one said, I am teaching my kids, or I'm making sure they take art lessons, I'm making sure they know about art, I'm taking them to museums, so that even if they didn't become artists from living here, they wanted to foster the love of art, which I think is so important to this. What is the main thing most important thing, not the main or most, but very important thing about this community is how they generated a whole generation of people who are both artists and lovers of art.
Yeah. It's so true. And so important to the village and the whole downtown scene as a whole that there are people beyond the artists who go to the galleries and see these things. So let's talk a little bit about history and archives. What is it like for you to think about your artwork as you're here? Like if you're new here, starting to archive, or is there a way that Westbeth either formally or informally supports the kind of history of your work and archiving your work? And if not, is there something about the history of being in this place that kind of affects you and your art?
With Open House New York, these interviews that we've done, we did 19 videos in 2020 during the pandemic.
Wow.
We were able to do that because we have the time and space. When we did it this year, we did 6 interviews, just to contrast. And you know, we did, oh my God, Bob and Elizabeth Gruen, Ralph Casey Lee, like such important people, and the documentation of their spaces along with their being is so incredible, and we get to do that here, and that's a lot of fun. And we also have so many other programs that generate media that's going to be around for ages.
Yeah.
And more.
Yeah, that's incredible.
The archiving of work is a big question because people do produce a lot of work. A lot of them, it doesn't get sold. And so that's a big question. There's no storage space really for art here. A lot of times families will take, of deceased artists will take 1 or 2 paintings, but a lot of times artists are like the outliers in their family, so they never understood what they did or why they did it. So they would take a couple of paintings, but there's no like real attachment to the art. And for a long time, that art was casually disposed of or got lost. Recently, not recently, in the last 5 or 6 years, the flea market has saved a lot of that art and is now reselling it at very, wonderful prices. But the most important thing is that work is not lost, that people come down there, buy it, and are thrilled that they have original art.
We had a show this year with a curator who went down and grabbed some artwork and sold artwork here at the gallery.
Right.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, beautiful.
So, but that's a big question that we as a building have not found about how to archive some of this work. There's a beginning of an arts archive, but it's not funded yet, and we're not quite sure how and where it will go.
Yeah.
But it's easy to do media, but the heavy duty, the actual piece, which is also important. It shows the brushstroke and the feeling and the texture.
The big chunky sculptures.
Yes, it gets lost. So that's something we have to actually face.
We need like a black hole compactor so we can take all the sculpture and artwork and just like
It's all there for the
it's like,
taking
we
later.
want that, and then there it is.
Yeah.
Our ongoing building an archive of artists, profiles, right?
Completely, yeah. The website is a huge portion of the place as well, which Christina Bailey takes care of diligently, and it's such amazing work. I mean, there are artist profiles that people do individually, that residents do individually. There are all sorts of articles and events and documentation that people work on throughout the building, different angles, that include all sorts of persons and what they do.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the digital gap is getting some of it, but the actual artwork is the question of the physical space. Yeah. Before I open it up for questions from the audience, do you all have any questions for each other that you'd like to ask? I didn't prep them, so if there are no questions, sorry to put you on the spot. But
We hang out.
oh yeah. So you all know each other too very well. Or anything you'd want to highlight about someone else or their work that would be interesting to share with the group, or something you've learned?
Our tenants both have shows next year.
Oh, great.
I believe James is our October show, and Valerie is our January show.
Okay, so mark your calendars right now. Yeah,
I'd also like to highlight that the Westbeth also has an artist at risk program
That's
where, I think that we have 3 residents every year, and they come from places where their art has actually caused them to fear for their life. So recently we had someone from Uganda, and someone from Iran, and someone from, the Congo, Democratic Republic of the Congo. And now we have someone coming in from Nicaragua, Afghanistan, and someone else, I can't remember. But for us, well, for them, it's wonderful living here, being able to freely make their art and without any kind of censorship. And for us, it is amazing to see how people still strive to make their work despite the most horrendous circumstances. So that's a great thing that we have here.
That's beautiful.
That's